Dr. Pepper. Something that we all love and know because it came from the great state of Texas. And as Texans, we're pretty proud of where we came from. Dr. Pepper, invented in 1885 by a guy named Charles Alderton, who was a pharmacist at Waby Morrison's old corner store. What he wanted to do when he was making that drink was recreate that smell when you walk into that soda shop. So that sweet smell. So he ended up mixing up 23 flavors behind a fountain and created the great drink we know as Dr. Pepper. But originally it wasn't called a Dr. Pepper. It was just called a Waco. You say, "Shoot me a Waco, sir," and that's how you would order one. How we best believe that it got its name Dr. Pepper was the owner of the store, Mr. Morrison, was in love with a girl from Virginia, and her name was Miss Pepper. He wanted to marry Miss Pepper, of course, and so he went to her father, asked for a hand in marriage, and he said no because he believed that they were too young. So he was like, okay, maybe if I name my drink after him, because he was a physician, so Dr. Pepper, it will kind of smooth him over, and maybe I can marry his daughter. And so that's what he did, named the drink Dr. Pepper, and it took off. And so he was like, he went back, asked for a hand in marriage again, and he still said no. So it was kind of a sad story for Mr. Morrison, but he ended up marrying a girl from Texas instead, but of course we're partial on that one too. If you look at Dr. Pepper logos, it's pretty cool because they all have their own little symbol and own story majority of the time. In 1940s, they have a label that it looks like red tile with white caulking in it with cursive Dr. Pepper on it. The guy they got to actually redo this, because they revamp them every 10 years or so, he was in a hurry whenever he turned in this design and forgot to tell them, hey, that red graph paper I did it on is not actually part of the logo. So majority of people thought this was red tile, but really it's just a mistake and shouldn't be there at all. If you go on to the 1950s, this is going to be the time period where they have dropped the period. Just because with the font they used on this logo, if you put a period on it, it would look like a colon, so they dropped it and haven't put it back since. So this will help you guys date stuff whenever, if you find something with a period on it, it's before 1950s, no period, after 1950s. After you go on from 1950s to 1960s, you notice that there is a golden arrow on the bottom of some of those logos because they did a partnership with Chevron for a short period of time. You also may notice that the third P in Pepper is more elevated than the rest of them, just because Dr. Pepper was supposed to be the first energy drink because of how much sugar was in it. So that third P that's more elevated is symbolized pepper upper. Get your energy up from that. After the 1960s comes on the 1970s with a brand new logo, and it definitely has its own unique story. At the bottom of all these logos, it's going to be extended on the letters. The two P's in the middle are supposed to symbolize bell bottoms because that's what was popular in the 70s. After the 70s, they kind of lose their story behind them. They go into the stripe and then the racing stripe and so on and so forth. But all logos have so much detail and thought put into them that sometimes you don't even realize it. Another drink that came out, still Dr. Pepper, but a little bit more special than the rest. Something that's a little bit sweeter and tastes great. Some of you all may know of the drink called Dublin Dr Pepper. Of course, this drink no longer exists because whenever Dr. Pepper and Snapple merged, they decided to end their partnership with Dublin Dr Pepper. How it all happened was they started suing a bunch of their little bottling companies for all different reasons, you know. But they said that Dublin Dr Pepper was selling outside of a 44-mile radius, and they were also saying that they were diluting the name by putting Dublin in front of it. Of course, corporate stuff, but they fought it for about 6 months, spent over $1 million on it. Of course, Dr. Pepper corporate is much bigger than a small Dublin bottling works, and Dublin decided to, instead of closing their doors, settle with Dr. Pepper and no longer be allowed to make anything Dr. Pepper. But since then, they have come out with 16 new of their own flavors, all still made with the Imperial Pure Cane Sugar, like their old Dublin Dr. Pepper, but nothing tastes just like what they used to do. But how Dublin Dr Pepper started. Sam Houston Prim, from Sulphur Springs originally, came to Dublin because it was a booming metropolis back then, which it doesn't really seem like that now, but back then it was a very ag-based community like it is now, and the railroad was a big, huge, popular hit. So people were coming in from all over the place, and they were said to be the size of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or that's what they predicted it to be. It still is about 3,000 people that live in this small town, but they love it that way. Sam Houston Prim, whenever he did come, his main goal was to open a soda shop, or a bottling line, as you can see. But they couldn't have just kept their doors open if they were just a soda shop or a bottling line, just because drinks like that were very unpopular to get. Maybe you get 1 or 2 every 6 months. And all that was really popular were sarsaparillas and ginger ales and things like that. And so Dr. Pepper was a very weird and odd flavor. And so whenever Sam decided to bottle it, of course it didn't take off right away. In 1904 is when it finally took off nationwide at the St. Louis World Fair, the same place that hamburgers and hot dogs on buns were introduced, ice cream on a cone, cotton candy, and even peanut butter all came out and became famous at this fair. So it's pretty cool that we finally got into the limelight on that day for that. After Sam Houston had started the company and ran it until 1947, he left it to his daughter, Grace Prim Lyon, and it was very uncommon for women to run and own businesses, and she was kind of very stubborn, so she made a wager with everybody. If she made it to her 100-year anniversary, she could laugh at them. If she didn't, they could laugh at her. No harm, no foul. She actually did make it to the 100-year anniversary of the plant, but she passed the morning of. So it definitely was kind of sad, but she got her last laugh in for that. She's the one that we still credit using all of the imperial pure cane sugar today that they use in all their drinks at Dublin Bottling Works. When everybody was switching to the high fructose corn syrup because the Cuban Embargo Act, it was so expensive to get sugar because of the war and so on and so forth, they decided we don't really like it with the high fructose corn syrup, so we're going to stick to how we used to do it, or how we have always done it, and that's what they did and still do today. WPK Closter, introducing him, he started working here at the Dublin Bottling Work plant when he was 14 years old as a bottle washer for 10 cents an hour. From that day, he never left the company unless he went overseas in the World War II and served in the tank destroyer unit. But from that day, he stayed with the company for 67 years, and it definitely was part of the family, or he became part of the family for that. When he was overseas, they would actually send him a case of Dr. Pepper whenever they found out exactly where he was stationed at the time, because when he was home, he would drink about 10 to 15 Dr. Peppers a day. He loved his Dr. Pepper, and he was known as the Mr. Dr. Pepper man. So it's kind of cool to see that they still loved it, even overseas for that. His wife, Iona Mae Closter, actually had started a small collection of Dr. Pepper memorabilia when he was overseas, just kind of as a joke when he came back. When he did come back, he fell in love with the idea and started collecting anything and everything he could get his hands on with the name Dr. Pepper. Now, today, you can still go into the Dr. Pepper bottling plant or the Dublin Bottling Works Museum. They have about 12% of his collection on display, and still to this day, he is the #1 Dr. Pepper memorabilia collector, and he's been gone for over 17 years. So if that tells you anything about how big his collection is. When he did come back, though, he became the general manager of the plant, and later on, whenever Miss Prim passed away in 1991, she had left him the company because she was a widow at an early age and never had any kids. And so this is going to be the second family that the Dublin Dr. Pepper Museum and Bottling Works in the bottling plant is now under. He ran it for about 8 years and did a lot of cool things with the collection and with the pageant and everything like that. And then when he passed away in 1999, he left it to his son, also known as Bill Closter. And then whenever he passed away, he left it to his sons, Mark and Jeff, who are still the current owners today and run it side by side with all of the staff that work there now. Even though Dublin Bottling Works has said sayonara to Dr. Pepper, they still have 16 great flavors, and it's definitely worth the visit.